Severe weather warnings for the Cape York Peninsula, a potential tropical cyclone developing in the Coral Sea, extreme heat across Western Australia approaching 50 degrees. That's what we're dealing with this Monday, the 19th of January, 2026. There's a lot happening across the country right now, and some of it deserves your full attention. So let's get straight into it, starting with the tropics, because that S where the action is. Right now, we've got two separate low pressure systems that are about to interact in a way that could produce some significant weather for North Queensland over the coming days. The first is tropical low 14U, sitting out in the central Coral Sea. It's a big, broad, messy system at the moment, not particularly organised, but at S there. The second is tropical low 17U, currently hovering over Mornington Island in the Gulf of Carpentaria. This one S, smaller, tighter and more concise. And at S, this second system that we need to watch closely. Here's what is expected to happen. Tropical low 17U is forecast to hang around its current position for the next couple of days before tracking across the Cape York Peninsula and emerging into the Coral Sea by Thursday. Once it gets out over those warm waters, development towards tropical cyclone status is possible as we head into the weekend. Now, before it even gets to that stage, the Cape York Peninsula is in for some rough weather. This is a monsoonal system. And when we see monsoonal systems like this one, they can really enhance the westerly winds across Cape York. We're talking sustained winds between 60 to 80 kilometres per hour, with gusts potentially reaching 100 kilometres per hour, particularly closer to the centre of low pressure. That S borderline cyclonic conditions without the system actually being classified as a cyclone. For those around Thursday Island and the Torres Strait, it may well feel like a weak tropical cyclone over the next couple of days. Add in the heavy rainfall that comes with these systems and you've got conditions that warrant serious attention. The heaviest rainfall is forecast to begin tomorrow morning. That S, when both systems start to properly intensify and the monsoon flow kicks into high gear. This wet and windy pattern is expected to persist right through Wednesday and into Thursday. By Thursday, the low-pressure system should emerge from the Cape York Peninsula into the Coral Sea. From there, it's forecast to head out towards the southeast, intensifying as it moves away from the North Queensland coastline. Now, here S where it gets interesting, and I reckon this is the bit that L have some of you sitting up straight. The forecast models are showing something unusual. Instead of this system continuing out to the southeast and dissipating harmlessly over the open ocean, we now seeing consistent guidance suggesting a U-turn. The system could curve back towards the Queensland coastline somewhere between Rockhampton and Cairns as we head into early next week. I know what you are thinking. One rogue model run happens all the time, means nothing, but it's not just one model. The GFS is showing this U-turn, bringing the system back towards the North Queensland coast around Townsville, albeit as a weaker system by that stage. The Icon model is doing the same thing, perhaps a bit further north. The Access model is calling for it too. And Google SAI forecast, which has been performing remarkably well lately, is also on board with this scenario. That S4 out of 4 major forecast models now showing broadly the same outcome. When you look at the upper level winds and steering flows, there does appear to be a ridge developing down towards the Tasman Sea that could funnel this system back towards Queensland. There's another ridge over near Fiji that adds to this pattern. Am I sold on it? Not completely. Not yet. We need more consistency from more model runs before we can say with confidence that this is going to happen. But if you on the Queensland coastline, this is worth keeping an eye on. It's the kind of situation where preparation now could save you grief later. Don T be scared. Be prepared. That's always the approach. Now, I should point out that even if this system does intensify out in the Coral Sea, the immediate impacts on the North Queensland coast are expected to be limited because this is a monsoonal system. Most of the moisture and strongest winds will be concentrated on the northern and eastern sides. The southern and western sides, which would be interacting with the Queensland coastline, are expected to be relatively dry and subdued. So for those in Cairns, Townsville and the far north Queensland coast, The direct impacts from this System S passage into the Coral Sea should be minimal. It S only if this U-turn eventuates that we need to reassess. Let S shift focus now to what S happening across the rest of Queensland. Southeast Queensland has been copping it lately. Hot and humid conditions have made life uncomfortable for weeks now. Brisbane and the Gold Coast have seen some decent storm activity, and there is more on the cards. An upper level trough moving through today and into tomorrow is going to spark showers and thunderstorms across pockets of Queensland. The most likely areas for activity are the Darling Downs, the eastern Darling Downs particularly, and the southeastern coast. Now, this isn't going to be a severe weather outbreak. The atmospheric setup isn't conducive to widespread severe storms, but we could see some isolated strong cells produce heavy rainfall, gusty winds, and maybe even small hail in a few spots. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to keep things interesting. The Sunshine Coast and areas from Gympie South through to Brisbane and the Gold Coast should see the best chance of storm activity later today and into tonight. Rainfall totals 1 TB massive, but every bit helps. Some areas have been doing it tough with rainfall this summer. Brisbane, particularly the northern suburbs around Aspley, has seen well below average rainfall since the start of December. Toowoomba S only recorded about 35 millimetres since the 1st of December. That S dry by anyone S standards. The good news is that more widespread rain is on the horizon as this upper level trough moves through over the next couple of days, and as the monsoonal moisture starts to filter south from the tropics, there should be better chances of decent rainfall across the eastern half of Queensland. For those on the Sunshine Coast who have been watching storms dissipate before reaching them, that pattern should break down somewhat this week. The atmospheric moisture levels are increasing, which should help storms maintain themselves a bit better as they track through. Moving south now to New South Wales. Showers are continuing across parts of the state, particularly along the coastal strip. An onshore flow is keeping things moist, and that pattern persists through the first half of the week. The heaviest falls are expected along the mid-north coast and northern rivers regions, where orographic lifting along the ranges will squeeze out additional moisture. Totals of 20 to 40 millimetres are possible in some areas through to Wednesday. Sydney and the Central Coast can expect scattered showers, but nothing too heavy, maybe 10 to 20 millimetres over the next few days. The catchments could certainly use it. Further south, Victoria and Tasmania are in a quieter pattern. A ridge of high pressure is keeping conditions settled for now. Melbourne S looking at a few days of pleasant weather, temperatures in the mid to high 20s before the next change comes through towards the end of the week. Tasmania saw some cold mornings over the weekend. Frost in the northern suburbs of Hobart, temperatures dipping below zero in some elevated areas. That is a reminder that even in January, the Apple Isle can turn on some chilly conditions. The next few days should be milder, with temperatures climbing back towards more seasonal levels. South Australia is sitting pretty. Adelaide and surrounds are enjoying close to perfect conditions. Mid-20s, sunny, just a lovely spell of weather. Enjoy it while it lasts, because there's always something coming. Now, let's talk about Western Australia, and this is where I need you to pay attention. Extreme heat is building across the northwest of the state, and when I say extreme, I mean it. This isn't your typical hot summer day in the Pilbara. This is something else entirely. Temperatures through the inland northwest are forecast to reach 48 to 49 degrees today. Tomorrow, we're looking at temperatures pushing towards 50 degrees in some locations. There is even the possibility of maximums approaching 51 degrees in 1 or 2 spots. To put that in perspective, a 44 or 45 degree day is on the upper end of normal for this part of WA. You might see a handful of those each summer. 47 degrees is what I call a very hot day. You might see 4 or 5 of those in a year. Once you get above 48 degrees, you are talking about a once a year event. And when we start approaching 50 degrees, that's serious, serious heat. Keep in mind that those figures are the forecast maximum at standard meteorological height, which is about 1.2 metres above the ground. Down at ground level, particularly on roads and in direct sun, ambient temperatures could be significantly higher. We're potentially looking at surface temperatures approaching 52 to 54 degrees, maybe even higher in some spots. The Bureau of Meteorology has issued an extreme heatwave warning for the Pilbara region. That doesn't happen often. When it does, you need to take it seriously. My advice, and I don't give this lightly, is to avoid travel through the inland Pilbara over the next couple of days, if at all possible. The corridor from about Carnarvon up to Port Hedland, particularly the inland routes, is going to be brutal. If you break down in that kind of heat, away from assistance and without adequate water, you can be in serious trouble very quickly. We re-talking life-threatening conditions. Make sure your vehicle is in good condition. Make sure your air conditioning is working properly. Carry extra water, more than you think you'll need. And if you don't absolutely have to travel, stay put. This heat will ease by the end of the week, but for the next couple of days, the interior of WA is going to be one of the hottest places on the planet. Now, while we on Western Australia, let's touch on the tropical situation up there. Tropical low 16U is currently offshore to the west of the Kimberley coast, producing showers and thunderstorms around Cockatoo Island and towards the north of Derby and Koori Bay. Darwin was hoping for some of that moisture over the weekend, but the low has moved too far west to deliver meaningful rainfall to the top end. That is disappointing for those who are counting on it. The low-pressure system itself is in a relatively unfavourable environment at the moment. Significant wind shear over the past couple of days has really hampered its development. A few days ago, the models were taking this system towards the WA coast as a potentially powerful tropical cyclone. Now, no model is even favouring tropical cyclone development from this system, that SA significant downgrade, and it shows just how difficult these tropical systems can be to forecast when wind shear gets involved in unexpected ways. For the Pilbara and Kimberley coastlines, it appears the all clear can be given from this particular system. It's not going to develop into anything significant and it's not going to threaten the coast, but don't get complacent. The tropical season is far from over. There are signals for another low pressure system potentially approaching the WA coast south of Christmas Island towards the end of January. There's also the possibility of another system developing around the Kimberley or top end in the same time frame. Tropical cyclone activity looks likely for the last week of January into the first week of February across the Pilbara and Kimberley regions. So while this particular threat has faded, the next one could be just around the corner. Stay vigilant. Keep your preparations in order. The season has plenty more to throw at us yet. Looking at the broader outlook now, for Queensland, the next week is going to be dominated by the evolution of that coral sea system. Whether it stays offshore and curves away or whether it makes that U-turn back towards the coast will determine whether we are talking about a non-event or something more significant. I'll be watching the model runs closely over the coming days and providing updates as the situation becomes clearer. The monsoonal trough across the north will continue to drive wet and windy conditions through Cape York and the Torres Strait through midweek. Severe weather warnings are likely to be issued. If you in that region, prepare for conditions similar to a weak tropical cyclone, even if the system itself isn't officially classified as one. For New South Wales, the unsettled pattern continues through the first half of the week before high pressure builds in towards the weekend, bringing more settled conditions. Victoria and Tasmania enjoy a quiet spell before the next front moves through late in the week. South Australia maintains its pleasant conditions for most of the week. And Western Australia battles through this extreme heat event before some relief arrives towards the weekend. For those checking in from various parts of the country, I know conditions have been variable lately. Some areas getting hammered with heat, others still waiting for decent rainfall, temperature swings making people crook. That's just the nature of an active summer pattern. Things should settle down somewhat as we move through the back half of January, but there is still plenty of weather to come. Right, that covers the main developments for today. The key takeaways are these. First, the Cape York Peninsula is in for a rough few days with borderline cyclonic conditions from the monsoonal low. If you in that region, prepare accordingly. Second, the potential for a coral sea tropical cyclone making a U-turn back towards the Queensland coast is worth monitoring. It's not certain, but it's showing up consistently in the models now. Watch this space. Third, the extreme heat across the WA interior is genuinely dangerous. Avoid unnecessary travel and take all precautions if you must be out in it. Fourth, the original tropical threat to the Pilbara and Kimberley from 16U has largely passed, but more tropical activity is expected before the season is done. And fifth, for the rest of the country, it's a relatively quiet spell with scattered showers and storms in the usual summer pattern. That's the situation as it stands this Monday morning. I'll have more updates as conditions evolve, particularly as we get more clarity on that Coral Sea system and whether the U-turn scenario is going to play out. In the meantime, stay safe out there. Keep an eye on the official warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology and your local emergency services. And if you re in one of the affected areas, make sure your preparations are in order. We've got an interesting